All right, good morning, everyone. Hope you are all having a wonderful Friday morning. If you happen to be on the West Coast, if you happen to be somewhere else around the world, good afternoon, perhaps, or even good evening. So, my name is Jen, and joining me today in the studio are quite a variety of folks. So, we have Sarah that's going to be doing our controls for the very first time, so it'll be very exciting for her. And yes, she does exist, so it's nice that she's really joining us in the office and Dana's with her. And then we have Cynthia as well as James and Emily helping out with questions and all like. So with us today, or for our class today, we are going to be focusing on behind the scenes, specifically looking at how we are building some of our habitats here at the aquarium. Our focus is going to be on the giant Pacific octopus, which is going to be very exciting. Now, we are currently in our education department, but there are so many other varieties of groups that work here at the aquarium. Some of the ones, or one of the ones that we're going to be highlighting is part of our husbandry group. So within they're the ones that take care of the animals here at the aquarium. Within that, they are divided into different groups. Some focus their attention mainly on fish. Others focus their attention on some of our specialty invertebrates, and some of them even focus on mammals or birds, though a lot are kind of learning about each other's animals and how to take care of them here at the aquarium. So, with that, the type of profession that they are known as are called aquarists, and those are the ones that take care of a lot of the fish as well as the invertebrates. So, as an aquarist, if you think about it, okay, if you need to be the one taking care of these animals, what kind of information do you need to know? Hmm. I may need to know information about probably the animal, right? Knowing, let's see, if I think about the animal, maybe about where they live, maybe some of the foods that they like to eat. Hmm. Maybe their behavior, right? Like, what do they prefer? Are they ones to kind of like move around a whole lot? Are they ones that really like to sit still in cracks or crevices? Are they hiders, right? So that's behavior, something that we have to think about. And so these are just some of the factors that we need to be able to consider. Now, if we think about their habitat, their home, their behaviors, their food source, right? But we also need to think about if we're building this habitat for them from scratch, we need to think about where they might actually, like, where would you put this, right? At the aquarium here, we definitely have lots of different exhibits. But as we go through and we delve a little bit deeper, you may have some questions, which I almost forgot about. So, if you do, thank you for that reminder, Dana and Sarah. You can always text your questions right here to this number at 562-286-1838. If you do happen to be watching this later on, you can email us. We'll put that up in a little bit. But as of right now, please go on ahead and text your questions right on in. If you are a younger one, please make sure that you ask for permission from an adult, and texting rates do apply. So with that, as we go on ahead and we are building our exhibit, right? What are some other things we think about? The actual physical tank, right? The physical exhibit itself. So maybe if any of you have, like take care of fish at home, you might have a fish tank, right? You have to think about the size that you're going to get and the type of animals that are going to live in with them, right? Are they going to have lots of roommates? Are you going to focus in on one animal? Something to definitely think about, right? And of course, you don't normally just have a tank. You also need, well, if you think about it, all the comforts of home, right? If they were out in the ocean, we'd have to basically mimic or recreate that kind of environment. So what exactly would that look like? Well, may have to think about a lot of different factors, right? What kind of habitat, what kind of ocean are they living in? What kind of temperatures do they like living in that ocean? Hmm. Well, definitely something for us to think about. In the meantime, our exhibit of choice today, and this is one of our blue cavern exhibit behind me here, but what we're going to be focusing on is not so much fish like the ones that we see here, but on some octopus. And so that's going to be our main animal. Now, aquarists, like I mentioned before, they have to think about the animal and everything that it likes, right? They also happen to be engineers, which we'll get into later on today, of how we actually build it. But before we build an exhibit for an animal, let's learn a little bit about it. So that way we know how we might want to build and stylize our exhibit for our octopus. So here is one example of an octopus off of our Southern California coast. It is called a two-spot octopus because of the spot that you see here. And there's actually another spot on the opposite side of it too. Now, these octopus kind of use these two spots to kind of mesmerize or kind of really kind of confuse their predator of like, wait, is that an eyeball? Because if that's an eyeball, that eyeball is huge, right? And so it's definitely a way that these animals right here can, one way that they can kind of, you know, figure out a way to get away from a predator. But if we think about an octopus in general, right, looking at this animal that we see here, what else do you notice? Well, I noticed that it definitely has eyes, right? So we know that our octopus has eyes. It has this big kind of mound right here. And then it also has all of these different tentacles that we see all on the bottom right here. So we know that our octopus looks pretty much like squishy, right? Does an octopus have any bones? Not so much, right? For these friends, they're considered mollusks. They don't really have, octopus don't really have any real hard parts except for their mouth, which they have a little beak that's kind of in the middle. So it'd be right kind of inside here. But as a mollusk, right, they're considered soft-bodied animals, but they are related to clams. So if we think about clams or oysters, any of those that have two shells, those are considered mollusks. But if we think about how over time these octopus have adapted, they are actually considered, if we take it down a notch, even though they are mollusks, they are considered cephalopods, meaning head, foot, right? So these animals basically have two distinct sections to them that we're seeing. Now, as we mentioned, right, there really aren't any hard parts in an octopus, though its other relatives have a few additional harder parts. We have a nautilus that we see here, right? This one has the most amount of hard parts within our cephalopod group. As you can see, though, it has the head, right here with all of its little tentacles right here, and then it has the rest of the animal as well. And so this one is super ancient, these nautiluses. And so this is another example of a cephalopod. Squid and cuttlefish are also other examples that we see here. So we have a nice example of a cute little cuttlefish right up here. So once again, kind of like that bulbousy top, and then all of the tentacles that we see right here. Now, these octopus are pretty amazing creatures. As we mentioned, they don't really have too many hard parts. Our cuttlefish has a cuttle bone inside of it, which makes it that round shape. But our octopus friend that we have right here doesn't really have those hard parts, just its beak. So if we think about it, if I didn't have any hard parts, I could probably fit into a lot of different places, right? I could probably squish myself into cracks and crevices, maybe squeeze through some holes, right? There's lots of really cool places that I could go. And that's great because many of these octopuses, especially ones off of our coast, like the giant Pacific octopus, the red octopus, the two-spot octopus, they love to kind of wedge themselves on into their little den. So if you imagine an entire rock area that sits above, you can squeeze right on in to that little den right there. And there's a great picture of one, excuse me, that's just kind of hanging out right underneath there. Now, octopuses do tend to be nocturnal, so they tend to come out at night, and that's why they do a lot of their hunting. Now, how do you think these octopus hunt? Do you think they swim around and look for something and then they go, how? Or do you think they might be stealthy? Well, let's think about it. Our octopus friends that we have right here, it's kind of a reddish color. But do you think they could change color? Let's go on ahead and see if Sarah can pull up a video on how these animals can change color, and we'll see for ourselves. Here we go. We have our octopus, and looks like he's looking into cracks and crevices. Isn't that incredible? It's changing color and texture. Oh man, So if you think about these animals, right? What mighty predators these animals are, how they can move and glide and change texture and change color and look into these cracks and crevices. Now, because they don't have any bones, all of these little arms that they have here, they have 8 arms, have all of those suction cups. And you can kind of see some of those suction cups as it moves around. Now, these suction cups are actually a great way for the octopus to go deeper into those cracks and those crevices to help them feel and even smell where their food might be. So I know Jax was asking a question earlier about how do octopuses smell, and that's a great question. Here behind me, you can see an amazing picture of an octopus's tentacles. And all around, within each octopus's tentacle, you can see little suction cups. And those suction cups around the outside edge, they have little like scent receptors. So it's not like a nose, but they can pick up smells just by kind of touching and feeling around, which is really cool. Now, if you think about it, our octopus right here is kind of just hanging out. But I know Edwin is asking how fast an octopus can move. And that's a really good question, right? In our last video, we saw that it can move fast, but it can also kind of move slow. And that's because these predators are very stealthy. So they can camouflage however they would like and change colors into the background and eventually move and eat really quick if they want to. Or maybe they like to hide and wait and then pounce and come out. So depending upon the octopus type, there are lots of different ways in which these octopus can eat. So great questions. Thank you for asking. Now, we're learning a lot about our octopus so far, right? We know that it likes to hide in cracks and crevices, that it generally comes out at night. It actually likes to eat a lot of different things, so a wide variety of foods. But a lot of them off of our coast tend to eat a lot of like small crabs, hermit crabs, small fish, maybe some shrimp, some clams, even some tasty lobsters. And so those are just some of the food sources for our fun friends that we happen to have right over here. And so they use that beak, that hard beak, to be able to crunch and crack open to a lot of these foods. So that's pretty interesting too. So with that, let's try to think about its home, where it might live. Now here at the aquarium, we kind of start out with building our exhibit. So we have a large exhibit and we started out with empty. So we don't have anything in it and we slowly start to put in rocks. So here we have a fairly empty exhibit. We do start out with a few animals though. So we start out with completely empty and then we fill it up with water. And we'll talk about how that water goes in and kind of like the behind the scenes process. But right here, we start out with a few animals and before we put in our main octopus, because octopus can be sensitive to a wide variety of like chemical changes that are in the water. So we let our water sit for a few weeks sometimes to be able to kind of what we like to call acclimate, right? It's the water's getting to the right temperature, it's all the right chemical mixture that's in there, the salt water's looking good, and all the behind the scenes equipment's doing really well. So here we have our octopus exhibit and we have a few of its tank mates, right? A few of its roommates. So here we have some anemones that are living in here. We also have some seaweed that's right here too, right? So it mimics their actual habitat. Now, the octopus actually fooled me because it looks like our octopus is in here. If you could see it, there it is, right? You can see just a few of its tentacles and suction cups right there. And so these animals are pretty incredible. Now, they can hide definitely back there, right? So that's cool that we have a hiding space for them. And if we look throughout the rest of the exhibit, we can see lots of other areas where our animals can hide. Now, the tricky part is at the aquarium is we also, not only do we want the animal to feel comfortable, but we also want to make sure that the animal feels stimulated and happy and healthy. So the way that we do that is also by getting a chance for it to interact with guests. So we have a large window. So right now it's like as if you're peering directly into our exhibit, right? If you're that guest and you're looking directly in. So that's really cool that you can see the octopus doing whatever it wants. But now, as we kind of talked about, right, an octopus needs to stay happy and healthy. And here we have our octopus, and it's actually moving all around the exhibit that we can see here. And it's traveling. And you can see those suction cups moving around. Now, it's pretty amazing. That's where its mouth is directly underneath right there. Is that it is feeling around, it's checking out its environment. I'll move out of the way a little bit so you can get a better chance to see. But our octopus, to be able to move around all of these 8 arms that you see here, has a pretty crazy complex brain. In a way, it almost has, I'm like covering up the octopus here. The octopus has about 9 brains that we use kind of loosely. And so it has one main brain, and then it has 8 like mini brains that help control all of the movement of these arms right here. So that's pretty incredible. And not only do these animals have those 9 brains, but it has 3 hearts as well. It has 2 hearts that are focused a little bit on its breathing, and then those hearts pump all that oxygen into the main heart that then pumps it for the rest of the body. So that's pretty incredible there. But that's something that we have to consider, right? Not only is the temperature of our water here, but also how much oxygen is in there too. Huh. Any thoughts on how we might actually get a chance to look at our water quality? How can anybody at home have any sort of a fish tank at home? How do you maintain the temperature? How do you maintain the cleanliness of that water? Because this is just like a slice of the ocean home, right? Any thoughts on that? Well, lucky for you, you're going to get a sneak peek into how we go on ahead and take care of our filtration system here at the aquarium. Now, temperature is definitely one thing that we have to take care of. And so around the aquarium, we actually have a lot of different temperature gauges. We have water that flows through these temperature gauges, and it helps us to be able to figure out, okay, now I know that our water is about, oops, wrong side here, about 47.9 degrees, right? And it has a set point. So it helps us to be able to figure out right here what exactly is our temperature, what is the correct range. Now, on the opposite side, we have a certain amount of flow that's going through our exhibit. And so that's denoted here with another one of our meters, and our flow is about 71.5 gallons per minute. So that's a lot of water that's going through what we like to call the back end, the life support system. So these are 2 main parts of our life support system that we have here. And this is monitored by our husbandry staff or aquarists all the time. So that's definitely one aspect of making sure that we have a very happy octopus, right? Is looking at the temperatures that we have here. But let me answer some of the questions, because it definitely is in regards to kind of building our habitat. So we did get a question of whether or not the rocks are real or fake. And for that particular exhibit, off the top of my head, I don't, some of our exhibits do have real rock, others less so. I think this rock wall was built, yes? Okay, so it's concrete and plaster for this particular wall, but depending upon the exhibit, there's others that have real rocks that are kind of sprinkled about. So we do have some that are on the bottom right here that are real rock. So it's kind of a mix, some real, some not so much. But that's one of the cool things, is that you can also take kind of like an artistic license to how a lot of this exhibit is put together. And we received another question of whether or not we control the lighting. And yeah, for sure we do, right? So that's definitely something we need to consider. Now, many of these octopus, depending upon the variety, like for instance, our red octopus can live up in some tide pools, but some of them like to live super deep down. And so we want to make sure that our lighting and even the timing of that light accommodates our octopus as well, or whatever other animal that we're taking care of too. Just like how at home, if you have an aquarium, you might not want to leave the light on at all times. You might only turn on the aquarium light for a certain time of the day. So awesome. And we have, looks like Josue is asking, how many sea stars are there? That's a good question. Let's see if we could try to figure this out together. I'm going to step off camera so that way we can get a full view. And it looks like we have, I see maybe 1 back here, 2, 3, 4. I think so far I only see about 4 sea stars. Oh, it looks like there's also a sunflower star. I'll move over to the side here. Right in between the anemones. Very cool. All right, so we have about 5 or 6 sea stars, and they're all different varieties, which is really fun, but definitely a lot of different colors of our bat stars. Bat stars are a type of sea star that can come in lots of cool colors and also lots of different patterns too. All right, thanks for those questions. Keep sending them in. But yeah, definitely temperature, as we mentioned before, is something that we want to make sure that we are aware of, as well as the water, the water movement, and then also the lighting too, right? So those are definitely some things. Other items that we might need to consider might include that filtration, right? We want to make sure that our water stays clean, so that way our octopus feels like it's living inside of a nice, clean environment, right? I kind of think of it as like with at home, if you leave everything everywhere and it's really messy, it's, you get kind of like, ugh, after a while. I would imagine an octopus would feel kind of a similar way. Here's one example, though, of a sand filter that we have. So this bulbous area right here has a lot of sand in there, and a lot of times sand filters have lots of different particles, different sand sizes. So you know how like sand can be like super fine and powdery, and other times it could be like kind of grainy, and other times it could be even pebbly, right? And so the sand filter here uses sometimes different sizes of sand. Sometimes it's all one size, and it traps a lot of the kind of like poop that might be in the water, a lot of the smaller particles. And so it's a nice way to kind of filter your water on through, and that sand traps a lot of that gunk that's in the water. But the water that we have isn't just in our exhibit. We have something called a sump too that has a lot of additional water. So sump, S-U-M-P, is an extra pool of water where that filtered water goes through and then eventually makes its way back onto the exhibit. So that way we don't have to rely just on the water that's in that one exhibit. Here's a picture of that sump. And so we have all this extra water that's in it. And it's a pretty sizable. I don't know how many gallons are in our sump, but definitely more than 100. And so within our sump right here, we have other types of filtration too. I talked about that sand filter kind of getting rid of those fine particles of gunk. For some of the bigger, gunkier stuff, we have these filters right here. They look like really big socks, and they can be called socks. And so if you imagine this, and it's just like a sock. It's one really long, big tube. I don't think I have one here. And so with that, that really helps trap a lot of that initial material. An equivalent to the sock, if you have an exhibit, if you have a fish tank at home, it's kind of like that white stuff for your filtration tank before you put in the carbon that keeps the chemical portion going well. All right, but so we've talked about a lot of that physical filtration, right? Getting all that gunky stuff, all that poop out of the water. But believe it or not, there are other parts that we need to consider as well. So with that, we also need to consider kind of like the chemical composition that's in the water. And a lot of times when animals go on ahead and pee, they end up peeing, and the chemicals need to be broken down further before it's usable by some good bacteria that are in there. And so on that sump picture actually that Sarah had up, there was a tower that had some blue stuff, and those are bioballs. There's bacteria that are on these little balls, and they are good bacteria that help really break down a lot of that nitrates or nitrites, sorry, that are in the water. So here you go. They're actually inside, so you really have a hard time seeing it. And this is of a different exhibit. And so it's underneath that blue cap, and if you just imagine just a tower full of these little balls that are about this big or so, and they are just filled with nooks and crannies that help our good bacteria grow and stay alive and break down those nitrites into nitrates, which then they're able to eat and keep a happy and healthy environment. All right, so there are other parts of our filtration too. I know, you're like, there's more? How is there even more? We have additional things like UV filters. Now, I don't think we have a picture of that exactly, but it's of a bright blue light, and that helps blast away any kind of like bacteria and viruses that might be in the water that we can't necessarily filter out, kind of like our socks or our little bio balls that we have or anything along those lines. But we do have other components too that help keep our animals happy and healthy. That would include, Ah, excellent. So we have a video, I was just told, of our protein skimmer, which is another part of our filtration. So let's go on ahead and see if we can pull that up. And that we're using the harnessing power of bubbles right here. And the protein skimmer, you can see bubbles are actually being injected right here, and water, or seawater is right here. And as the water gets injected with all of these bubbles, it sends all of the really teeny tiny pieces up to the very tippy top, and you can see all that gross stuff right there. So much like foam you might see in the ocean might bring up scummy stuff, the bubbles do the same thing here, which is pretty incredible. So gets kind of gross to be able to clean out, but pretty incredible the different ways that we have to filter our water just to keep our animals happy and healthy. Now, that's not the only part that we need to do to keep our animals happy and healthy. As mentioned earlier, our octopuses are really smart. They use their camouflage to be able to hunt, and they're really sneaky and amazing animals. And so with that, especially with some of those animals, we need to have different forms of enrichment. These are different ways that keeps our animals mentally stimulated. Now, you might have heard that term while watching a seal or sea lion program here earlier, talking about different ways to keep our animal mind stimulated. But the same thing for our octopus too. And so there are a lot of really neat ways that we go on ahead and we keep our animals stimulated. This is one awesome example right here. Our Mr. Potato Head, Mr. Darth Vader Potato Head, which is extra awesome. And you can see here too, a little tentacle that's pulling it in. Now, it doesn't just like, having toys just for fun, even though that is pretty awesome in itself, but there are some tasty treats living inside of our Mr. Potato Head right here. Maybe some shrimp, maybe some clam, some delicious tasty treat that it needs to find its way to get into Mr. Potato Head to eat the tasty treats. Now, we have other octopuses here, aside from our giant Pacific octopus. One of them is a red octopus too. So our variety of octopus all get different kinds of enrichment, and this one happens to have a treat inside of a box. And so we're going to get a chance to watch that video of that octopus enjoying its treat inside of a box shortly. But in the meantime, I do have some additional questions. And so where do the fish and octopus come from? That's a great question. So because we are considered, we are part of the AZA Zoos and Aquariums, so we're accredited through that organization, and we are upheld to very high standards. And so if you're a part of that organization, you all have very similar protocols and are upheld to a certain level. And so we are allowed to kind of trade with other AZA organizations, and that's how we get some of our animals. Other times we have permits, and we're depending upon the type of animal and its population out in the wild, we can use those permits to be able to collect certain animals with the permission of the permitting agency. And so that's where we can also get a lot of our animals, is just right off of our backyard with all the right papers, and we can collect them that way, either through scuba diving or just kind of snorkeling and collecting them that way. So excellent. All right. So let's go ahead and let's look at that video of our red octopus. So you can see it here. It's looking inside. It's checking out what's in there. Looks like it's fitting inside. Is that not absolutely adorable? Oh, there's a shrimp in there. Such a tasty treat, right? And so this is a really great way to not only keep the octopus stimulated, but also to find ways to be able to kind of train an octopus too. So that's pretty incredible to be able to see our octopus do that. Squirt out some water. Now, red octopus are really great because they actually live right off of our coast here in California, and they are considered intertidal, so where you can find these kinds of octopus right here, right within our very own backyard. But they also can go super deep too, so it's pretty incredible that we can have these animals and be able to train them that way. So that was really cool. But let's go ahead and end. I see that there are a variety of questions I want to make sure that we're able to get to. And so we had some questions about sea stars. So why doesn't the sea star eat the stars? I'm guessing that we're probably referring to the sunflower star and whether or not it eats those bat stars. So, sunflower star is a predatory sea star, but many times sunflower stars generally like to eat brittle stars. They're a little bit more tasty and delicious. But that is something that we definitely consider as we're kind of building our habitat for octopus. Is what kind of animals can coexist, can live well together, and that of course are naturally found within that same ecosystem or that same habitat. Okay, and potentially it could have been taken as why doesn't the octopus eat the sea stars? And it's actually not their favorite food. They do not enjoy eating sea stars as well. But once again, it's important, right, to have that kind of predator-prey relationship in mind. So another question is, can you put another octopus in that exhibit? Ooh, well, octopus can be quite territorial, and so generally they like their own space in their own area. But once again, another factor to consider, right? So there's so many different things you need to think about as you kind of build a home for an animal, right? Who does more than one of it get along well? Does it not, right? How do they relate to one another? All right, and we have Chris asking, how are octopus born? Ah, that's a great question. And so with that, there are male and female octopuses. And one way that you could tell the difference is females have suction cups all up and down all of their arms. Now, males, on the other hand, if you look from the third one from the right, I think, you will see that there will be some of the suction cups missing. And that's where the hectocotyledus is. And with that hectocotyledus, that's where basically it's like a sperm packet that gets given off to the female, and the female can then take it to then fertilize her eggs later on. I don't know how long it takes before they hatch, but I do know that for giant Pacific octopus, they can have up to 70,000 eggs at one time, which is pretty incredible. Actually, I think they hatch between close to 200-ish days or so, and they are super cute. They come out as miniature baby octopus and are absolutely adorable. And so thank you for asking that question. And lastly, our last question for the day. Oh, there it is. It's so cute, isn't it? Look at this little baby. I love them. They're so great. Many times when they're born, they're like the size of a penny. They're like super duper small. So they're very cute. And lastly, Ivan is asking, how do they squirt ink? And that is a great question. They have something called a siphon on them. And so that siphon, here's a great video of one. As you can see right here, that siphon opens and closes, and that's how it's able to help it breathe, right? It brings in water, it goes through its gills, and then it's pumped out. And so that's how they're able to really kind of squirt that water, is by using that siphon that they have right there, which is a characteristic of these mollusks right here. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I just want to say thank you so very much for joining us behind the scenes and focusing in on one of our exhibits, looking a little bit closely at the octopus exhibit here at the aquarium. If you do have any questions, feel free to go on ahead and send us an email to live@lbaop.org. And we'll be happy to answer those questions when we get them. Can you tell I'm ready for lunch? I think I'm ready to have a little lunch myself. All right. Hopefully you all are having a great rest of your day, and feel free to come on join us later on. I will be talking a little bit about conservations of seals and sea lions next on our 1 o'clock program. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everyone.